Hey everybody, it is Jordy from Seven Eagle Group. I'm really excited today for today's conversation. This guy's had a really cool career. Started out with 9 years in the Marine Corps, working as a company commander and assistant regimental liaison officer. When he got out, he went to a big company called Godiva Chocolatier, one of the top chocolate companies in the country or in the world, I guess. I was there for 3 years working in supply chain as a manager, and now he's been at Boston Beer Company, which you probably know it as Sam Adams is one of their biggest, but they also own Angry Orchard, Dogfish Head, Truly Hard Seltzer, and Twisted Tea, among a bunch of other ones. And he works as a senior supply chain manager right now at Boston Beer, so he's got a great job. Amazing company, lives out of Philadelphia. Yanni Hronas. Am I pronouncing your last name right?
Yeah,
Hronas?
you got it.
The H is silent, right? Hronas.
There's an imaginary E or a silent H, however you want to look at it.
Hey, Yanni, man, thank you for jumping on, man. I appreciate you spending some time to share your story and offer some advice, some suggestions for transitioning service members and veterans who are trying to navigate their career. Let's start at the beginning with you. I know you grew up in Erie, Pennsylvania. What made you join the Corps?
Yeah, it's that question of like what why did you join? What were you looking for? In the head of a 17-year-old kid. I remember 9/11 happening, and I was a little bit younger, but I was like that. I got to go do something. I need to be a part of it, right? Grew up in, my grandfather had served, and I kind of always wanted to do something that challenged myself. And I remember distinctly like that happening, and me saying, all right, that's what I'm going to do. And plus, I knew that my grandfather owned a manufacturing company at the time, and I knew that wasn't for me right out of the gate. I wanted to do something that got me out of Erie, got me away, and really challenged myself. I needed to do something that really pushed myself past comfort. I knew it in my bones.
Yeah.
So I ended up going to the recruiter, and my parents refused to sign. They would not sign the paperwork at 17. And I ended up into a position where the only person supporting me at the time was my grandfather to enlist. And so, unfortunately, I was fortunate. One day, this guy came in. I didn't know at the time, right? It was this captain. He was an OSO, an officer selection officer, and he came in and he said, "Look, your SAT scores are sort of good, and why don't you apply to this scholarship?" And so I had cut a deal. Either I got the scholarship or my parents would sign the paperwork, so when I graduated, I could enlist. And I ended up getting the scholarship, and kind of that started the journey into college and getting a degree to then commission in the Marine Corps. So
did your parents ever come around to support you?
Oh, yeah.
Or was that always a battle?
Yeah, no. I think it was more fear, right? At that time, back in 2003, 2004, it was a little bit scary for them. And so I don't think it was they did not support at the time, because they then became, fervent supporters of me during my...
Yeah, just more of the fear, like you said, fear of a parent having their kid go off.
Yeah, it was something they didn't understand. They didn't have any connection to it. So yeah, they supported me. They supported me during my time at ROTC at the University of Pittsburgh. I ended up double majoring in history and political science, which is kind of like one of the de facto degrees that Marine Corps officers get when they're going through the ROTC program. But they supported me that whole time. And then when I commissioned in May of 2009, they were right there pinning my bars on me. So
that's great, man. I'm glad. Oh, that's awesome. Why the Corps? Why did you choose that over the other branches?
Because I fell right into it, Jordy. It was the hardest. It was the best of the best, right? I didn't know much else. I just knew that the knight fighting on the chessboard, or the guy scaling the mountain to defeat the dragon, right? For 17-year-old me or 16-year-old me, that was the coolest thing ever. Like to be the best, right? To claim some space to be that, right? And growing up in fell into that whole thing of like, what's the best, what's the challenge, what's the hardest thing I can do. And so for me, I ended up selecting the Marine Corps.
So their advertising worked on you, huh?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. So talk a little bit about what that experience was like during those 9 years, what you
Yeah.
did, what you got out of it.
So it's you kind of see the, I don't know if you want to call it fate or whatever, however you want to turn to phrase it. I commissioned. There's a long pipeline for a Marine Corps officer getting in. It took me about a year to get through the basic school, which is, every Marine Corps officer goes through 6 months of infantry training. And I'm going to do air quotes on infantry training. It makes you a basically qualified infantry Marine. It doesn't, there's a separate school to make you an infantry officer, but you do that for 6 months, right? You learn all the basic skills, land navigation, how to use a weapon system, all the weapon systems, planning, etc. And then, went to my MOS school and I got selected to be, a field artillery officer. So when you join the Marine Corps, except if you're going to be a pilot, you don't really have an MOS. You have to compete for that MOS. And so wherever you fall out in the ranking, you get an MOS, and I got selected for artillery, which was one of my top choices. And the life of an artilleryman is a little bit different, right? You are either detached from a parent unit and supporting somebody else, or you are running a battery and you're part of the field artillery. So I got to go to Oklahoma, which was unique and interesting. Had never really lived anywhere else, so that was my first time really kind of living on my own out of state in Oklahoma, a lot in Oklahoma. And then it was like I could not wait to get to the fleet. So there was always this mythical, I need to get to the fleet, I need to get into an operational force, I need to do something. And so then I ended up reporting to 29 Palms. And for anyone who's watching, who's familiar with the Marine Corps, 29 Palms is the Stumps. It is the middle of the Mojave Desert in Southern California. It is the best place to be stationed for training, but the worst in terms of quality of life. It is the middle of nowhere, bar none. So I got there, and like I said, it's the best place for training. So jumped right in. Ended up going to our what's called liaison group. So got started to attach to other units at the base. Got to spend time with tanks. Got to spend time with the infantry, and that's when we started our first workup with 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, and that was my first deployment. So deployed with those guys to Sangin, Afghanistan. Did that in 2011 into 2012, and then came back and took over as the other side of artillery and joined an artillery unit proper, joined a battery, did the fire direction officer. So I was the guy responsible for the math that got the bullet from point A to point B, which I can tell you, it can be life altering to be like, if I screw this up, something really bad is going to happen. But you have a lot of smart Marines. You have a lot of people who've done it for a long time, really supporting you. It was challenging. It was tough. It was hard. It was good work. A group of guys, and then eventually gals as they came into the field artillery were, we were really working hard, and it was really, really good. And as you get closer to your end of your initial 4 years, you get to go somewhere else. And so started learning about what 4 else would be. Oh, I did deploy again, but we went to Japan. So went to Japan again, came back, and then after that, it was like, what's next? And that's where I went to MCIOC, or the Marine Corps Information Operations Center, which you want to talk about a 180-degree difference. I went from being an artillery guy in a shared office to working in a SCIF, which is like a top secret facility. Had to get top secret clearances. I was like, oh, I don't even know if I'm going to pass this. What am I going to be doing? I don't understand what this is. It was a new concept for the Marine Corps. The Army had been doing it for a while, so it was new for the Marine Corps, and we were trying to get into the space. But it was an operational command. So as I got there, I ended up deploying again on the 26th MU, and went to Italy and Bahrain, and we did operations in the Middle East. And it was different. It was like, if I was going to equate it to someone on the outside, the way I sell it is like, it's like marketing for the Marine Corps. It's like how to market to the enemy and to ourselves to make actions happen on the battlefield. So it was completely different. Then, from there, switched back over and went back to artillery. Ended up in Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii. So big move. At this point now, I'm married. I'm schlepping my wife around the whole country. I'm leaving her constantly to go do all these trainings or deployments. But we got to go to Hawaii. So I kind of looked. I was like, see, this will be
It's Hawaii.
positive for you. Like you get to go live in Hawaii for a couple of years. And so we get to Hawaii, and very shortly after I get to Hawaii, there's a need for a company commander in Fuji, Japan, which runs the little camp there that trains both Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines on mainland Japan. And so I ran that camp with some really close friends, and you and I were talking about a little bit before we started. You keep in touch with them, and it's absolutely like we're maybe not the best at it, but definitely keeping in touch with all those folks along the way. And so I spent about 7 months being a company commander out there, and went back. And at this point, the conversation with my wife was, what's next? We're coming up on 10 years. We're at 9.5 at the time. Do we do this for another 10? And we kind of had to make a hard choice of like, do we do this knowing how often you're going to be gone, knowing how often you're going to do all these things, or do you try your hand at something else and really challenge yourself again? And so I kind of got back to that initial question of like, all right, what's going to challenge me the most? What's going to really put me in an uncomfortable position, but also give my wife and, at that time, finding out my future kids what they need.
Yeah. What, looking back now, how do you feel that experience in the Corps? You did so many neat things and traveled all over. How did that prepare you for your civilian career? How did that make you, who you are today? How did it help you get those jobs? How did it give you that confidence?
I think two things. And, as I was going through the interview process, or even as I interviewed for other roles, before Boston Beer, as I was looking or being approached at the end of my time at Godiva, the question you'll get is like, well, what's your superpower? And I'm like, let me think about that. That's kind of an odd question. But I think it comes down to, your ability to learn and your ability to manage and execute even in, really stressful times. I was lucky at Godiva that my boss had been prior military, so she was able to kind of help nurture my career and help me learn the differences and how to get through some of the more discrete stuff that are just different, that you have to learn, and how to change your mindset.
Yeah.
But the things that you don't realize are like things that rattle other people's cages do not rattle your cage. Right? Like they just don't. They don't reach that same level of severity, even though it's hard and it can be challenging, and you could be on deadline or you could be short to customer orders. You're never going to get rattled. And so being able to stay calm, cool under pressure, evaluate data, and make a call, even when you know that you don't have 100% of the information, that alone sets you apart. And then number two is, I don't know this, but I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure it out quick because I know I'm behind the power curve. And so, learning your quote unquote weapon system, right? Like, candidly, I had to figure out Excel. Like I had never used Excel the way they were using it in the business world. And that's not really an excuse. So it's, what do I learn? How much time do I spend on LinkedIn learning so that when someone's doing pivot tables, I can do them better or, as good as they're doing it. And so I think those two things really are what kind of define or set you apart. And two, no one's going to work harder than you.
Yeah.
There's just no concept of like, if I ask you, hey, be up at 3 a.m., show up at the armory, you're going to clean weapons, we're going to get in the truck, we're going to go to the field. Like, okay, got it.
Let's go.
Like being able to say like, yeah, hey, you need me at the warehouse at 3 a.m. to make sure that this delivery goes good, or, a truck driver busted one of the butterfly doors, so I need to go in and fill out the insurance claim with the police or the police report so I can do the insurance claim. Absolutely no problem. And so you those things that you intrinsically know and have learned over your time in service, just let those be, because they're going to do really well for you in the civilian world. You're going to set yourself apart right out of the gate.
That's interesting. It's like you have that confidence knowing, like, I've been in some tough situations. I got through them. I worked my ass off. Whatever they throw at me, I got it. And I'll figure it out if I don't know it right away. Yeah.
Yeah. If I don't know, I'm going to find out who the smartest person in the room is. I'm going to pick their brain till I learn, right? Like, as a young lieutenant, you don't know anything.
Right.
You don't know anything. So you're finding the sergeants and the staff sergeants and the corporals and the lance corporals who are better at their job than you are, and you're learning how to gain just enough knowledge so that you can help them do their job effectively. And if you take that concept and that mindset and you apply that to warehousing or supply chain planning or production scheduling or material ordering, you end up at the same level of success. You just didn't realize how you did it.
Yeah. Talk about Godiva now. How did you hook up with them? I mean, what a great company. And was that difficult to obtain that position? Did you seek them out? Did they come after you? Did they recruit you?
No. So I had the great opportunity to work with a company called Cameron Brooks. Very similar to I think your organization, right? Taking folks who are in the military, and if you are sitting there at the end of your time in the service and you're like, all right, I got to do my transition training, I got to fill out my resume so somebody at the learning center can check it. You're like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to land a civilian job that's not minimum wage, because I just don't know how to take what I've done and translate it. And so, Cameron Brooks is a recruiter. They help take, specifically young military officers or military officers in transition, help them translate their skills into something that someone in corporate America could read and understand and say, okay, I might not know what $27 million of rolling stock is, but knowing that you maintained and managed $27 million of something is pretty good, right? That's a good KPI to have on a resume. And so they help craft that, and then they teach you, okay, here's how you interview. Here's how you sit down with someone who's evaluating you for a position and communicate with them and talk with them and make yourself personable and not come off like either a robot or someone who's completely outside of the culture that wouldn't fit. And so, working with them, they helped me with that. And so what they do is they link their candidates up with, Fortune 500 companies or companies at certain levels that would be open to hiring military folks. And you go through these like panel interviews. So like I was talking about, you get your suit and you're standing there in a hotel room and you're just round robining with all of these companies that want to hire military guys or girls. And you're like, I think I had 16 or 17 interviews in one day. And then the next day you did it again. Oh yeah. It's literally, that's a great analogy. It's like speed dating. And so at the end of the day, you guys are ranking each other, and then you go to on-site interviews where you're actually sitting down in the facility. And so anyway, I really connected with the folks at Godiva.
Nice.
When I met the hiring manager, her and I got off to a really good start. And I did things maybe a little bit outside of the script. So as soon as I walked out of Godiva, I knew that was the role for me. I knew it had the scope of responsibility. I knew it had the team leadership, the impact level that I wanted. I still wanted to feel like I was in some level of leadership role, still, leading teams and leading people to get the mission done. And so I wrote her an email afterwards, and I said, look, I know that I'm probably not on paper the best candidate, but I can tell you this: I'm going to learn quickly. I'm going to come in, and these are the 3 things that you called out in the interview as a problem that you have right now. Right? One of the best interview questions for me is, what are the 3 things that keep you up at night? And then immediately walking out of that interview, I'm going to say, here are how I will address those 3 things in the first 90 days of me showing up as part of your company. I had a really good mentor kind of give me that advice, and I did, and I think it worked because she liked it. So they ended up hiring me.
Let me back up a sec. So wait, in the interview with her at Godiva, she said, what are the 3 things that keep you up at night?
No, I asked her
that, or you came back to her later with the answer?
I asked her that. I asked the
interviewer. Oh, I got you. Okay.
And then when you write an email afterwards and you say, hey, great interview. Thank you so much for your time.
You.
By the way, here is how I'm going to help you solve those 3 problems that you got.
Brilliant.
And
good for
and so it was really good. And it was a positive thing because my wife's family is like 40 minutes from us. And so having, newborns at the time, it was really nice to be near-ish to family. We had been gone for 4 years. And so it was then a matter of settling down and starting the job. And, having newborns, starting a new job, moving from Hawaii, I think they say like top 5 things that are stressful in your life are moving, starting a new job, and having kids, and I think the other ones are like divorce or something. I was batting like 3 out of 5 at the time, so
You got
um,
them all.
yeah.
Perfect.
And so we
Yeah,
moved
yeah.
back as right as we moved back, we were still sleeping in my in-laws' basement while we were looking for a house, and I started work there.
Wow. And then,
But it was good. It was a good time.
um, talk about the transition over to Boston Beer. How'd that come about?
Yeah. So I mean, Godiva was a great role. As time went on, I ended up getting promoted there, took over more and more responsibility. Um, eventually the company started to change and grow, and then kind of COVID-19 hit. And so, decisions were made, certain positions were made vacant and kind of told like they're not coming back. And so when having, I think one of the hardest things, and not to get too on a tangent, right, for a military person to do is ask their boss, what's next for me and how do I grow? Because you don't always ask that question in the service. You don't say like, hey, I want to get a pay raise. I want a new title. I want more responsibility. You do talk about career development, but not quite as direct as you do in the corporate world a little bit. And so again, I had great mentors that were like, you have to have these conversations. And I did. And I had a really great chief supply chain officer at the time who was like, I can't promise you anything that's going to happen, but I know that the roles that you would normally grow into are not coming back anytime soon. And so I had to kind of make a decision, right? I'm, in my head, I'm 10 years behind my peers, right? So, if someone was the same age, grew up in supply chain, I'm about 10 years of experience behind them. I need to keep growing. I need to get more and more exposure to harder, more complex problems, more volume. So I kind of just put it out there. I just said, I'm open to work. I'm open to having a conversation. And a really great recruiter from Boston Beer contacted me, a guy by the name of Fern. And he said, hey, we have this, senior manager supply chain role open. It's on the planning team. It reports in and gives me the lowdown. But you have to move to Boston. And I said, well, let's have the conversation. I can't sure I can commit to that right here and right now. But anyway, so we have this conversation. I go through the interview process. The interview process is great. I feel the culture fit is great. I mean, Boston has an amazing culture. Boston Beer is an amazing company, especially for vets. We have a veteran network, and I just kind of meshed, right? During the interview process, it went really well. Same time, I'm interviewing at another company, right? Kind of in concert, more local, wouldn't have to move. And I really had to sit down with my wife and have an awkward conversation of like, what do we want to do next? Here we have 2 offers on the table, which again is another awkward position for someone who's never had to really do that in the military, to say, okay, I have to evaluate these not just on, compensation, but on culture fit, on what's the career path within the company, what's my growth potential. And it was hard. And initially I was really hesitant to go with Boston, but I knew it was going to be a better fit. And so I had to kind of assuage the whole moving to Boston thing at first, because I just was not prepared at the time to make that kind of move. I had 2 2-year-olds, or 2 1.5-year-olds, and a newborn. So I just was not ready to make that kind of move. And I'm talking to my now boss. He was like, look, we have a brewery in Briningsville, which is about 30 minutes north of me. He's like, you work out of the brewery, which is good because it's our biggest production facility. You work out of there during the week, and then you come to Boston once a month. I was like, done. And then started work there in July of 21.
Wow.
So it was really good. And then I started, and
so you
it
go
was a
from,
much larger.
how do you go?
Yeah.
Much larger Boston Beer, yeah. How did you, first of all, when you were at Godiva, how did you not eat all the chocolates coming off the line? I would have been horrible at that job.
My first day, they do this thing called tasting. So the quality techs have to taste like a piece of candy from every batch that gets made over the night, right? Because you have to make sure it meets the flavor profile and standard. So my first day, they're like, everybody in the factory does tasting. You go, you taste one, you mark, is it within profile? Does it taste bad or anything? I didn't know any better, right? So my boss is standing there and she's like, you're going to try this one and this one. One is called matcha and the other one was called Aztec spice. And they're not really big truffles. We don't use them all that much. They tasted awful. They were the worst. One tastes like you're chewing on green tea leaves, and the other one has so much like spice in it that it makes your eyes water. Really, for a lot of our overseas markets, but those were the first two. They became easier over time. I'll say that it did become easier over time.
And then you go to the beer company where you have to do taste tests there, I bet, huh?
Yeah, those are more controlled, which is nice. But there's definitely you could join the sensory panel and you sit on tasting panels to make sure your stuff's in profile.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about Boston Beer. So specifically, like what you do as a supply chain manager, and what are some of the challenges that you face each day? How you get over those?
So the majority of my role is mainly in planning. So I have 4 managers that report to me, and on our team are 16 total folks doing their day-to-day. So I have 16, we call it indirect reports, and 4 direct reports. And that team plans networking capacity, supply planning, inventory management, and materials, which is both planning and procurement, or the ordering, not the actual sourcing of it. And so if you imagine, we have 3 main major breweries that produce our product, and we have 5 external co-manufacturers, and we get a demand plan. So from my counterpart in demand planning, we are evaluating customer need and requirements, and then we're saying where and when can I make it, and to make sure it's on time, and then how do I make it in the most cost efficient way possible. And so I kind of equate it to like the central nervous system of your body, right? The brain has made a decision to do something, and then that signal needs to go out to every person that needs to be involved, whether that be quality, procurement, co-manufacturing, operations, sensory. There's new product development, commercialization, brand, like everybody. And you're developing a plan to say, here's how I'm going to support this decision, right? Whether that be your annual operating plan or your latest estimate or the current operational demand plan. You're taking the capabilities of your organization and you're arraying them in a manner to achieve your company's need, your customer's need. It is by far nonstop chaos in terms of trying to make sure that you can hit it, right? So, I want to put something on the line. I want to make this case of twisted tea, but we decided we changed the packaging. Do you have the right packaging? The supplier is late. We had a supplier be late on CO2, right? So we ran out of CO2. So you're looking at every ingredient. So if you think about the case of beer that you buy at the store, each can is its own SKU. Each wrap is its own SKU. The can lid is its own SKU. So we manage, 10 to 12,000 item codes to make sure they all show up on time in the right location to make sure that you can make all of this product of the 160 odd million cases that are getting produced on an annualized basis. And every little wrinkle kind of flows into that, right? Production miss, right? The line went down. A truck got broken into and someone stole the product out of the back of it. Truck flipped on the highway, or major failure at a co-manufacturing location. All these little things you're trying to balance, right, on a day-to-day, and you're trying to keep that operation going. And how I deal with it is because it gets very stressful, right? You have customers, you have sales reps, you have your boss, your boss's boss, all trying to hit your KPIs or key performance indicators, while managing things that are seemingly outside of your control. And I don't think anything prepared me more for that than being in the military, right? Because nothing's in your control, right? Whether you're going to, bring in the Mike Tyson quote of everyone's plan never survives until you get punched in the face. Like, that's very applicable. And if you don't have experience dealing with that, it can get very overwhelming very, very quickly. Yeah. And not to say that I have not been overwhelmed. Like, there have been times where it's just like, I don't know how to solve this problem. at all. And I don't know how I'm going to make this work. But I know that a lot of people are either really pissed off or, we're not going to be able to get the mission done. So how are we going to do it? What's the best solution? And I think being able to be in those uncomfortable positions or being in those high stress kind of environments where you're explaining what is going on and what your solution is, whether that be an 80% solution or a 60% solution, I think the service really provided me that, being able to be like, okay, I got this admiral pissed off at me. I got this captain pissed off at me. All right, let me remake the plan to see if it'll work to fit whatever is changing. And that fluidity, for me, has been really good because I can't be in something that does not challenge me. I can't be somewhere where I get bored.
Thrive off of that.
I need that. I need I had my old boss. The first rule of improving chaos is you gotta set some level of stability.
Yeah.
And so that's really my goal. And I think the Pareto principle applies. If you can get 80% of your life or your business stabilized, then the 20% of chaos that you need to manage, you can.
Yeah.
So
do you ever have a smooth day when everything just runs perfectly, or is that just not
those
the
are
cards for?
No, I would say most of the days, I would say 60%, 70% of them are smooth, right?
Yeah.
It's, I'll take last Friday. I think I had 5 major issues come up on Friday, and they always come up on Friday, Jordy. It's not like your Tuesday is going to be fine. It's your Friday afternoon where the supplier calls you and says, "Oh, by the way, I didn't make enough board. I missed our production run. I'm going to be 5 days late on this production run." Or, "Oh, the customer actually wanted twice what they asked for," kind of thing. That always happens on Friday.
When it rains and pours, they come in threes, right? They say.
And they always come in threes. So I know by the end of the day, my boss was about done with me messaging him saying, "Hey, I got another one. I got another issue." Just and I think not now another tangent or so, but I've always found that my bosses appreciate updates, right?
Yeah.
But that's something I did in the service, right? That's a sit rep. "Hey, boss, here's the problem. Here's what's happening. I don't have any more information. I'll get back to you." Click. Yeah. But that's not something that's taught.
Yeah.
But that's appreciative. So if all those things that you think are military only or that are not applicable, they're 100% applicable. You just gotta take a different look at it. And how would I take sending sit reps? How would I take that from what I normally did it for? And how do I do that and bring that into my new life and still apply it?
Yeah. No, I love how you're making those connections of all the great, skill sets and character traits that you had from serving, how those transition nicely when you think about it to the civilian world and really to any job, even if you are making a career pivot, you can draw on those experiences.
Absolutely. They give you that confidence too.
Yeah, that confidence.
100%. That you're going to be okay. You're going to be able to figure it out, even if it doesn't feel like it does.
Yeah. Speaking of confidence, so you seem, I see a trend with your career, you seem to, things work out for you, right? You get 2 job interviews when other people struggle to get, or 2 job offers when other people struggle to get 1. What did you do? Now let's talk about that those job getting tasks, right? Whether that be the networking, interviewing, resume writing. What are some of the some suggestions, some tips that you might have for others, to help them navigate this process? Because I'm sure it was extremely scary time, when you're leaving and you're like, "Oh shit, what's next?"
Yeah. I would say the first thing is you don't do it by yourself. Period. Whether you use an organization or a company or a recruiter or a mentor, you cannot do it on your own because you're going to get overwhelmed. Right? There's too much information coming at you for you to successfully digest, understand, and pivot in the correct way. And I've been fortunate in my life to have mentors or people who've done it before me that I could go to and say, "Look, does this make sense? Like, is this a job I would even want? And being able to talk it out with them, right? There's a lot of information out there on having a mentor or having someone you can reach out to, and whatever name you want to call it, having someone that you can talk to about what you're doing and check your work. Like, again, the artilleryman in me, right? 2 independent forms of verification to shoot around. So if I'm going to update a resume, I'm not just looking at it. I'm going to write it. I'm going to send it to somebody, and I'm going to send it to somebody else. I'm going to get their feedback on it. Hey, when you read this, what do you think? Hey, if I write this email, what do you think? And you don't do that for everything, but for things that involve your livelihood, absolutely. I'm sending, hey, double check this email. How am I coming off in it? Would this annoy you? Would this endear me to you? What would you perceive? And just get the feedback. And you have to be open to the feedback. You have to be open to the honest, truthful feedback. And you can't want to just hear, oh yeah, your resume is great.
Stuff, right.
Like, I have 37 revisions on my resume by the time I was submitting it out for Boston Beer.
Wow.
Because it was, if I would get it back from my uncle, garbage. Like, you sound unconfident, not confident here. I have no idea what this sentence means. What are you trying to tell me? This is too long. Yeah. And having that, and then that's just the resume, and then practicing the interview skills. Having somebody that you can bounce things off of is important. Having that community to be like, okay. The other one I think would be, don't ever say no to a conversation, even if you think it's not what you want. Right? Candidly, it was, chocolate. Like, I'm gonna work at chocolate like that. Like, that was my thing. I'm looking at my list of resumes. I'm like, I don't know. I just don't know about this. Like, it's easy, right? At least in the Marine Corps, and I'm sure in the other services, because I've worked with all of them. Right? There's a sense of pride behind what it is. Like, I'm a Marine. Here's my mission. Here is the unit I'm in, and you get this sense of camaraderie or pride in what it is that you do. And going from that and saying, I'm going to go, I don't know, work in a chocolate factory, kind of comes off like, am I going to get the same sense of, pride in what I'm doing? And I'm going to tell you, absolutely, you will. You will. Just trust me. Don't worry so much about that piece. I know it'll feel weird at first, but don't ever say no to a conversation. Yeah. And so, just opening yourself up to getting offers on LinkedIn. I know there's that cool little feature where you're like, open to work, come talk to me. And then just scanning. I mean, there was a time when, before I was approached by Boston Beer, it's like every time I saw a senior manager role on LinkedIn, I applied to it. And I had tons of conversations, probably in the neighborhood of 50 to 60 conversations with people. And at the end of the conversation, I was like, that's not going to be a fit. Or that would have been cool, but they never called me back.
Yeah.
And just going through that and realizing it's not about you. It's literally, it might feel that way about, they don't like me or they don't want me. And you're like, okay, that's not, but realize that the hiring manager is looking at that resume for 6 seconds. Yeah. I've hired a bunch of folks now, and it's not personal. You're looking for key phrases. You're looking for key things on there to say, hey, I want to talk to this person, just to get your foot in the door. And then it's never say no to the conversation and always kind of find a way to have another conversation when you don't get one. So I remember applying, not hearing anything back. And I just found the recruiter and said, hey, saw your role. Really interested in having a conversation. Here's why I think I could be really good in that role. I know I'm not great on paper. I look weird on paper, right? I think for folks that understand the military, there's always like, thank you so much for what you've done. It's like, oh, yes, my pleasure. But I'm going to put you in the no pile because I don't understand what I'm reading, right? So you're not great on paper. So you have to get past paper. And getting past paper requires communication. It requires you to just send a quick note, quick email. And don't make it long. Here's why I'm going to be great. I've done X, Y, Z. I'd be awesome. Hope we could have a conversation.
Yeah. I love that about you. Like, you're not afraid to put yourself in awkward situations, right? Where a lot of people are like, I don't want to do that. I'm going to be embarrassed. I'm going to say something stupid. But you just sort of went for it.
Jordy, I've said more stupid things in my life than I will. You gotta,
Oh, that's great. Let's just switch gears now. I want to now put on your sort of your hiring manager hat. Why, talking to other hiring managers, other CEOs out there, what makes military talent so important, so vital for organizations?
From my experience, it's the leadership and the work ethic. It's kind of what we were alluding to in the beginning. No one is going to work harder than someone that's coming out of the service. I mean, and I'm not begrudging anyone who's not been in, because I have a full team. None of them been in the service, and I have the best team. They work harder than anyone. But you're getting you're getting a product that you don't have to have experience with, that you know that they're going to dive right in. They're going to go at it 130%, almost to the point where you have to pull them back and say, too much, slow down. So when we look for, and specifically in operations, right? So folks that are, either going into the brewery or near the brewery or part of manufacturing, that's really where I've seen really great success for military folks, is because we want that leadership. And it's very similar. Operations is very similar to the military in terms of, like, you're leading people, you're leading a shift, you're leading a team of quality engineers, you're leading a team of maintenance folks. Well, whoever it is, like, leadership is leadership, right? And you can read as many books as you want. And I'm not, trust me, huge James Mattis fan here, right? Read until your eyes, you can't see anymore. But there's also something to saying you did it. You learned leadership. You can't take the military model and put it into the civilian world perfectly. But leadership is leadership. Right? Everyone thinks, like, I say you do, and that is absolutely not the model in the military. There's a protection, right? Don't get me wrong. Like, there's an organizational structure for sure, but your Marines are going to do it unless you're out there doing it with them, and you're in the front, and you're trying to do the best, and being humble, right? Like, a lot of people who say I have a really bad boss, like, he micromanages me, or she, degrades me, or she's aggressive, or he's whatever. It usually comes down to they're just not humble, right? They're not willing to look bad in front of their bosses. And I've never had an issue where someone's been like, hey, we got to talk about your performance. You didn't seem to be the smartest person in the room during that call. Never had that conversation. I have had the conversation of, like, you opened your mouth too much, and the person that knew was sitting right next to you. Empower them to do it. Right, like, you're a Lance Corporal that runs the maintenance on that house, or the sergeant who's the crew, the chief that's running that gun. He knows better than you do, so ask him, be there, support him, ask him what he needs, and put them to the front. Like, that kind of leadership it's hard to do, because you don't have that much opportunity as a young kid coming out of college, joining as an analyst or whatever. So highlight that. Like, I've led teams, I've managed people, and that is, you may not get to do that right out of the military, but you will soon, when people see what kind of leader, whether you're in a position of authority or not, that you are.
Yeah.
But as a hiring manager, that's what I'm looking for, because I know that I'm going to get a product or a person that's going to come in, they're going to hit the ground running, and I don't have to push. Nothing is worse than having to push someone to do work.
Yeah.
At least for me, right? I
cannot
stand it. And I know you don't get that. And the other part is intrinsic leadership that you may not even realize that you have coming into the civilian world. That is what people want.
Yeah. Yeah. Yanni, you are an impressive guy, man. And one of my favorite things about doing sharing these stories is I want to inspire other transitioning men and women who are coming out, who are scared, who,
I was scared as hell. I mean, that's 100% true.
Yeah. I want them to see, like, you are kicking ass, man. You are putting yourself in tough situations, and you get through them, and you figure out how to get yourself offers from great companies, and you're succeeding at those companies and doing an amazing job for them. And so you're really an inspiration, I think, for this community. And I appreciate appreciate you sharing all this stuff with us today and what you're doing and how you were willing to drop everything to jump on with me today. So I that means a lot to us here at Seven Eagles. So thank you so much, Yanni, for taking some time out of your day today.
Yeah, of course, Jordy. Look, I have to give back, and like you said, it is scary. Transitioning is scary, but like I said, find folks that have done it, me, whomever, your organization, and just ask for help.
Yeah.
Because I can promise you that it's not as bad as you think it is going to be.
Yeah.
And you'll get through it. You've
Spot
done it before,
on.
so why not keep doing it?
Spot on. I love it. Well, thank you everybody for watching, and please leave some comments and make sure to connect with Yanni at LinkedIn. Make sure to try all those amazing beverages they have at Boston Beer. I know I'm going to hit them all hard this weekend. So thank you, Yanni. I appreciate it. Take care,
of course,
buddy.
Jordy. Appreciate it.